Afro Elite, brother, I've been following you, man, for a while. All the work that I see you doing, I commend you. From seeing everything that you've been doing with the good brother Tariq Nasheed, and us being like in the same age range. It's refreshing seeing a good voice that I could tune into, man. You be sharing us great information. So first off, I just gotta salute you and give you all your flowers. So I appreciate you, man, for your time.
Thank you, and I appreciate you for the invite. I followed your work. I've seen you
Uh,
on YouTube. You do very good, efficient work. You
Thank you,
ask
bro.
good questions. You're articulate. You're
Thank you.
well spoken as well too. I know
Thank
that's
you, bro.
that's something that black men get told a lot. You're well spoken if
Yeah.
you're somewhat intelligent. But I
Right.
like and I like your production too. I think it's very
Thank you, brother.
professional, and I appreciate the invite. So
Yes,
I'm glad
sir.
to come on. Thank you.
Hey, bro, you already know, man. Afro, I'm a big fan of your page. I tune in all the time. Recently, with Joy Reid, she was fired from
Yeah.
MSNBC. And man, what I love is you break everything down. So for all the people that's tuning in, all the viewers, listeners, how did you feel seeing Joy Reid get fired? And you also predicted this back in November. So how did you feel once everything started to happen?
Well, thank you for saying that. I
Hmm.
did predict this when it happened. I knew it was going to happen sometime early on into 2025. I knew the way the election was going. She put all her eggs in this basket. When the Trump assassination situation, how she was mocking that situation, how
Yep.
she was mocking any and everybody who didn't want to vote for Harris, and how she was calling people out. I said, okay, you're putting all your eggs in this basket. And if she doesn't win, and if Trump gets in there, they're going to do house cleaning. And you're going
Mm.
to be one of the ones to go. Plus, I already understood after the election, MSNBC's views started dropping. I'm all like, oh, they're definitely about to make some cuts. There's definitely about to be some rearranging. So it was inevitable. Then I noticed there were some things where she was stepping out because you can criticize Foundation Black Americans and wag your finger at them. But then when you step out and you discuss other issues of foreign interest, of other issues, of other groups of people, and you speak on them with the same condescending manner that you speak on other black people with, that doesn't get tolerated by big media corporations. So I knew her time was coming sooner than later, especially after the election, the way it was going.
Mhm. Yes, sir. Indeed, man. How do you feel about our current state of Black political pundits, right? Who talk about these issues. And man, personally speaking, from seeing people talk about Joy and oh, she's for the people, she speaks for the people. I'm like, dang, is our bar that low right now? So how do you feel about those cornerstones like a Joy Reid, Roland Martins, all the various others as well?
Well, they're used as puppets. Okay, they're literally shields. They're used as essential vessels that are dark skinned black people. They're used as that so they can say what the white corporation wants them to say and be all like, well, no, it's not coming from us, it's coming from a black person, and you have black people saying this, and they have this cover of pro-blackness just like Joy Reid does or Roland Martin does, but really it's a democratic agenda. And a lot of people in today's society, foundational Black American, we're starting to wake up and realize that now. And with the access to the internet and with the access to podcasts such as this, with the access to different voices outside of what the mainstream corporation gives us, we get to understand and we get to research knowledge and view other people's opinions from different independent platforms, which takes away from their credibility. When, for instance, Roland Martin, when he did that interview with Kamala Harris, and he was making it seem like he was doing it for the people. Al Sharpton making it seem like he was doing for the people. Everybody, Oprah making it seem like she was doing it for the people. And then they found out later on, the receipts came back that all of them was getting paid. All of them, either they were getting paid personally or their business was getting funded. All of them had some type of monetary gain, which makes the people lose credibility because you're not a real journalist. You're not acting as a journalist. What you're doing is you're trying to use your platform as an echo chamber, and you're trying to push their narrative. You're working essentially for their campaign. So we
Mhm.
can't trust your journalistic integrity at all. And a lot of them are showing that. Joy Reid if she was a real journalist or a real anchor, so to speak, even if she had left leaning, she would be somewhat critical of the Democratic Party. And now there are some people who are some claim to be fair, but they lean more left or lean more right. And that's one thing. But the thing is that she had absolutely no criticism at all. She wasn't even open minded enough to allow people to have a dialogue about any type of criticism. As a matter of fact, she criticized and demonized anybody who had a criticism for any Democratic Party, calling people Russian bots, calling people COINTELPRO agents, and completely shunned and told people not to listen to foundational Black Americans or any voice at all that says we want something tangible. So when these things start happening, it only lasts so long before people say, okay, well, clearly, I mean, essentially, you just have a job. You work for the campaign, you work for the Democratic Party. So we can't trust that you're not biased. And that's one of the things when it comes to journalism is that you can't be biased to a political party. Otherwise, you essentially just work for them, which is what Joy Reid and Roland Martin and these corporations they do. So why people don't really trust what they have to say, they have no influence.
Exactly, man. Where do you see influence swaying now? Because now we have voices like yourself. We have Tariq Nasheed. We have Twitter spaces that I love just hearing y'all give good game in intellectual, deep black, foundational black American conversations.
Mhm.
Where do you see influence swaying now during this current time?
Well, I definitely see more independent voices starting to rise. I'm seeing channels, such as this channel, such as my channel. Tariq's been doing his thing for a while, but Tariq
Yeah.
has a very big platform. Shout out to Tariq. You know, I'm seeing more independent things start to really control the narrative and have the influence going. Especially young Foundation Black American brothers and sisters, we're really, getting our stuff going. We're getting the ball rolling. Even when it comes to the professionalism aspect, because we don't have corporations and millions of dollars sponsoring us, backing us up. So we just use our money here and there, and we get a nice camera, we get a nice microphone, and we just make it work. But a lot of the people like that because it shows authenticity, which eventually all of the mainstream media, the CNNs, the ABCs, the MSNBCs, the Fox News, all of that, people are going to start to sway away from them and more towards the independent media. I do also think, though, that there will be agents coming up. There are also agents now, but I think there will be agents coming up because the mainstream media understands that people are tuning away from TV. Most people are not really getting their information from TV or controlled sources. Most people are going to YouTube and Twitter, like you said, to get their information. So they're going to try to put plants there so they can somewhat have influence on the independent side. They're not going to be independent, but they're going to pose as independent, um, nonpartisan voices, but they're really democratic shills in disguise. So I see agents and stuff like that being embedded in the community if it is already kind of happening, but sometime soon.
Jeez, that's a crazy perspective because, man, I can see that too. Our generation, we have seen so much, right? And it's
Mhm.
like most of us are mid to late 20s, early 30s, and we've seen so much happen. And I remember back in 2008, President Obama, Black people were so happy, so excited. And it's crazy now, fast forwarding 15 plus years later, we're in 2025, it's a completely different atmosphere. Do you feel
Mhm.
like our generation should even entertain voting at this standpoint?
And that's man, that's a really good question. Should we entertain it? I think that we should be open-minded to the concept of voting, especially when it comes to locally, when it comes
Mhm.
to certain judges, when it comes to certain city council members, school boards, and all that stuff. I'm not going to belittle the importance of that. I don't think that we should rely on the result of a vote as much as our ancestors have pretty much taught us to. Like, hey, if we want things to change, vote, and they would pretty much have nothing else to say. I think that we should rely more on what we do on a daily basis. Us getting up, us participating in some community event or building a community event, having an after school program for the youth, or starting this business, trying to network with different businesses, we should rely more on what we do on the daily basis and allow voting to give that a boost. We should allow voting to have its place in helping aid the society. I don't think we should allow it or rely on it. I'm sorry, to change the aspects of society. That's something we should be doing on a regular basis. Now, as far as the vote, I think that definitely when it comes to that, we should be very strict and firm with our demands for the vote because our vote is very important. Our vote as Foundation Black Americans took a lot of sacrifice for us to even obtain. So
Right.
our vote naturally has a certain richness to it and value to it that other people's don't have,
Mm.
especially considering the fact that we are the swing vote in this country. So in order for us to just give our vote, we need to have a certain list of demands that are met. So I say, collectively, we have a set of values and beliefs and tangibles needed for the community that a politician, if they wanted to get the vote, needs to accommodate.
Yeah.
So we should use it like that. I don't think we should necessarily rely, just sit on our hands and knees and wait for every election cycle. We should be doing things on a regular basis in the meantime, and we can utilize the election cycle if there are politicians that are willing to, do what we demand them to do. But if not, we don't rely on it. And I think we shouldn't rely on voting, but we can use it as a mechanism when it fits us.
Indeed, brother. What would you say would be our top three demands as a group when it comes to the next presidential candidate in 2028?
Top 3. I would definitely say reparations,
Yeah.
number 1. It's been far, far too long. It's been ages too long.
Hmm.
Um, reparations, I can get into that in a second, but to answer the second one, I will definitely say a hate crime law specific for us. We've have like civil rights, hate crime bills and other
Hmm.
loose things, but nothing that really has teeth in it, nothing that's specific to us and nothing that has teeth in it. We are the number one a group of people who are targeted as far as hate crimes, and that's been ignored and it needs to be addressed the same way that gets addressed when it comes to every other community. The Asians, when they had their thing, that immediately got addressed, and we need the same. We need more than what they got, so we need that. Also, as far as number three goes, I think there needs to be something as far as the access to capital, because
Yeah.
what happens is that um as foundational Black Americans, we've essentially been locked out of capital. We've had a lot
Yeah.
of our capital, a lot of our homes, a lot of our property stolen from us. And then next thing you know, they'll build a hotel on your grandfather and your grandmother's acres of land. And you
Mhm.
don't get any type of residuals from the hotel. You don't get any type of money from the hotel. That's going on in Chicago with the situation with Miss Jackson, with Zoe Lee, where they'll take their property. Next thing you know, they'll build a store on their land, or they'll take their property and they'll turn it into I don't know, some type of retirement home or whatever they want to with it. So we need access to ownership of these things. So that's definitely something that they need to be doing, because that's how you pass down generational wealth, is through ownership. You have to own something in order
Yeah.
to pass that down. And we've consistently and systematically, based off of white supremacy, been stripped from that. So that needs to be offset. There needs to be legislation to offset that and to work against all of the systematic racism that's been keeping us away from ownership.
Yep. One of those things, of course, you just alluded to it earlier, reparations, right?
Mhm.
Why do you think reparations is such this dirty word anytime it's mentioned with foundational Black Americans in politics?
In politics, because reparations is really the litmus test of how willing you are to do things tangibly for Black people. There are, um, there was a thing, I'm not sure exactly the year, but there was a thing that went out from the Democratic Party that say, okay, you can listen to Black people. This was around the Hillary Clinton campaign. You can listen to black people. They said Black Lives Matter. You can listen to them. You can talk to them and try to sympathize, but don't give any specific tangible policies, because in the system of white supremacy, both the red and the blue, they want to maintain the racial pecking order of this country. Okay, the racial hierarchy of this country. They understand that the litmus test of reparations to allow us to essentially have control, which is why we're demanding first and foremost in the reparations cash payments, because that's something that we can't be finessed. That's
Mhm.
something that is existing in this current country, the current currency that we can completely control. They understand with that we will be able to mobilize the community and dismantle this racial hierarchy, which both parties are supposed to be maintaining. So that's why they don't want to address the situation. They don't want to address it, especially when it comes to the Democratic side, because the Republicans will just say no. The Democratic side, they don't want to address it because they're supposed to be the party of progressiveness, and they're supposed to be the party of making sure that everybody in America has equity and equality. So that's their brand, and they don't have a legitimate argument against reparations, so they can't just say no. But it would ruin their brand if they said that. So what they do is they ignore the subject. They make it seem like the subject is number one, too difficult, it's too complicated, or they just flat out ignored, or they will put some type of substitute for real reparations, and they'll say things like, okay, well, we're pushing this, and this is kind of reparations in a form, like for instance HR 40 or something like that. Or they'll say things like DEI or affirmative action. They'll put that in the same light as reparations, as doing
Mhm.
tangible things for black people, because they know not to change the racial pecking order of the country, but they can't say that we don't want to change the racial pecking order. Now, the Republicans, they'll just be honest and say that. But the Democrats are in a tricky space because they rely on the black vote and they rely on their brand being a certain way, but they can't be honest about their real agenda. And it's
Yes.
coming to a bad situation because um now the younger black community, foundation black Americans, we're starting to call out the fact that, hey, you guys been kicking the can down the road for a long time now.
Peace. No lies told, brother. What would you say was the biggest mistake of the Democratic Party back during the 2024 presidential election?
The biggest oh wow, they made a couple of big
Yeah.
mistakes. I definitely want to say, well, the mistakes happen. If I was just to put it in 2024, because the mistakes
Mhm.
happened some years ago, but that's a long conversation listing all of their mistakes. Um, their mistakes is the fact that they should have come to the community, the black community, foundational black Americans, with hat in hand and said, hey, we've been messing up. We need you guys. Tell us what we need tell us what you guys want, and we can do something now in good faith. One of the things I said, I was at a rally speaking in Chicago during the DNC, and I said, if the Democrats want something, they're in office now. They can do something now. For instance, the hate crime bill. It didn't take pretty much any type of work for them to get the hate crime bill in, I think, 2021 for the Asian American community. It didn't take no type of work at all. I said, you can do something now in good faith and say, hey, we've been messing up. We've been ignoring you guys, but we're going to first off do something to show you guys in good faith that we are changing and we do need to have a good relationship with our base. That's not what they did. What they did was they came out and they said there's a 40,000 black women on the Zoom call. There's 50,000 black men on the Zoom call. The black community is loving Harris. They tried to save face and make it seem like they didn't have a problem when it comes to the black vote. And anytime we said, hey, the black vote is pulling back, they was like, oh no, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's not true. So they was essentially trying to fake it till they made it. And they thought that if we just ignore the fact that we have a black issue, maybe that will fool enough people into believing that there is no black issue and that black people really aren't angry at the Democratic Party. And that will make our voices seem illegitimate. So they
Mhm.
were putting out a lot of fake polls, inaccurate numbers, instead of being honest, coming to the community humbly and listening to our demands, which they should have been doing for years, but that would have saved them a little bit. At least the loss wouldn't have been as bad as it was. But instead, they decided to fake it. They decided to fake it. So the result turned out to be what it was.
Yeah, it was bad too, man. John Hope Bryant, he's had this clip that's gone viral with Cam Newton on his podcast, basically saying how DEI didn't benefit us anyways. That
Mhm.
most of them was white women as the main beneficiary of DEI. So, brother, just for us, if you can break down why DEI being voted isn't the end of the world for foundational Black Americans. Why is that so?
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Um, DEI, and I say this is similar to affirmative action because I think a lot of Black people had learned from affirmative action, even though DEI and affirmative action are not the exact same thing. They're like siblings to a very close degree, right?
Mhm.
The thing is that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it was supposed to put forth initiatives. It was an initiative that was supposed to balance things out because we understand in this society that things are swayed towards white society, that things are unbalanced to white society, that they have preferential treatment over everything. And DEI was supposed to make sure that black people, because it was off the plight of black people, were able to get a more fair shake. It was supposed to give us the boost so the playing field could be even. The problem with that is that the terms that DEI implement is too vague. So that allows a lot of people who are quote unquote marginalized to get in to qualify for the benefits in the program. And what they've done is they say, okay, well, now technically anybody and everybody are marginalized. Women, they deal with sexism, so they're marginalized. Hispanics deal with racism, they're marginalized. Asians deal with racism, they're marginalized. People with disability deal with problems, so they're marginalized. The LGBT, they're marginalized. So that allows, it broadens people who can qualify for that. And they've done that deliberately because
Yeah.
with the people who qualify being so broad, what they can do is now they can filter out black people and push us to the back of the line. So we're
Mhm.
at the bottom of the barrel. And what happens is a matter of fact that becomes negative because our plight is used as a ramp for all of these other groups of people who first off don't face the same level of discrimination, if any discrimination, and number two, participate in our discrimination. There's a lot of white women who participate in the discrimination of black people. White women own slaves. You know, they participated in our discrimination. They're being gay or LGBT doesn't make you not racist. There's a lot of LGBT racist people. So, but they are benefiting from a program and an initiative that was started based off of our discrimination. You know, there's a lot of Asians that are anti-black, a lot of Hispanics that are anti-black, and they get a special boost, you know, when they get hired or whatever, and when they want to get promoted, and when a company wants to fill a certain quota or a certain image, they'll give a special boost and incentive to them based off of our discrimination. And then another problem is that we face the plight of DEI. We face the stigma, I'm sorry, of DEI. So when a black person who actually has to work twice as hard to get in that situation, they'll say, okay, well, you got there because of some unfair advantage. They use DEI as some type of black person wasn't qualified. And yet we're the only ones who get that stigma. Nobody
Mhm.
else receives that stigma from DEI, even though everybody else benefits from it. So we've allowed our plight to become a ramp for other people. And when we call out systemic racism and disparities in the workforce and schooling and everything like that, they'll say, okay, well, our solution is DEI, which actually worsens the problem because you're giving all of these other groups of people who participate in our discrimination an unfair advantage, and you're acting as if you're solving the problem. So, to be honest, with it gone, not only will we not be negatively affected by it, but it will also work for our benefit because the ramp that they've been using to have the buffer classes stay ahead of us is going to be gone now. Just like with affirmative action, everybody was acting as if black people weren't going to go into colleges. And what you saw a year later was that the enrollment of black people actually went up and the enrollment of Asian American students declined because they were using affirmative action as a ramp. So our plight has been used as a booster and a slingshot for everybody else. So with the playing field even, we will actually get further ahead. So it will actually be a good thing.
Indeed, bro. Man, hearing that, right? I think about like separation,
Mhm.
delineating, all of those things, right? How much has other groups benefited off of foundational Black Americans' backs here in America?
A ton, a ton. Everything they have is us based off of us.
Right.
Everything they have. Um, when you talk about the Hispanic community, the Asian community, the women's and the women. Okay, and when I say women, I mean white women. All of their
Mhm.
marches and rights and stuff like that. That's really off of the black of foundational Black Americans. The fact that we have laws in this country that say that you cannot discriminate based off of race, even not only based off of race, you can't discriminate based off of age, you can't discriminate based off of sex, you can't discriminate based off of disability, you can't discriminate based off these things. We have to understand in most of American history, they were allowed to tell you, oh yeah, we don't hire non-white people, we don't hire women here. They were allowed to openly discriminate until we have fought and we said, discrimination in any form, in any way, is wrong and it needs to stop. So, just off the fact that these other groups of people are not legally allowed to be discriminated against when it comes to school, when it comes to employment, when it comes to housing, the fact that we've essentially fought against desegregation so we can live legally anywhere we want to, even though America is very still segregated, very much so. But legally speaking, they can't say, oh, only whites allowed in this neighborhood. So
Mhm.
that allows all of these other people to benefit by proxy just off of just the rights. And then when it comes to initiatives to counterbalance all of the discrimination that we have faced, we've allowed it to be so broad and we've allowed the language to get so broad, all of these other groups of people can participate. And that's another boost that they get based off of our fight and our struggle. And then a lot of them, they rely on us economically. You have a lot of Asian businesses, nail salons, beauty supply stores,
Mhm.
restaurants, and they'll put that in a black community. And you have not only them, you'll have Arabs. They'll have like a chicken spot or whatever the case is, a corner store, a gas station. They'll have all of these ethnicities. I can go down the list. And they'll put them in the black community and we subsidize them, we fuel their economy, and they take that back to their community.
Mhm.
So we've been helping these people. We've essentially been the backbone of all of these people who've come over here, all of these other groups of people, and the white women as well too. The fact that they've been able to succeed academically, a lot of that is based off of affirmative action, which is based off of our struggle.
Yeah.
So we have been essentially the backbone of the success of all of these other groups of people.
Sheesh, indeed, bro. Hearing other cultures and other people, sometimes immigrants who try to come over here and say that Black Americans don't have a culture. If you
Mm.
can, what would you say if a person approached Afro Elite and say, you Black Americans, your culture is only debauchery, ratchetness, and things of that sort? What would you have to say to that?
Well, first off, I would ask them where they're from. And I would say that that's a projection because there's a reason. why they left their culture. They
Mhm.
left, there's a reason why they abandoned their nation, and they abandoned their nation to come to our nation because our culture built this nation. We have to understand that, and we have to be very clear with that. You say that we don't have a culture, but yet this country was literally built off of slavery. There's no slavery today because our culture said that this is wrong. We have a righteous culture that said that this is wrong and it needs to change. So we fought for it to change. And then with our culture, as far as being very innovative, as far as business, as far as inventions, we've improved and we've updated this country in order for it to become the powerful nation that it is, that everybody wants to come to. Now, of course, you will have parts that are frowned upon, parts that are negative, but to be very honest, unlike other groups of people, our crime and our, what you say, debauchery or degeneracy, our crime is very maintained. Okay, let's be very clear. Even when it comes to, like, for instance, gang violence and stuff like that in Chicago and other cities, our gang violence and our violent crime is nowhere near comparable to all of these other crimes.
Yeah.
The BDs and GDs in Chicago, that's not like the cartel. You don't
Mm.
have gangs completely running the government and running the city and running the police department. That's not how Chicago gangs work. That's not how gangs in America work. There's a couple of blocks, and I'm not condoning that at all, but even still, that other stuff is very maintained. It's just been giving a disproportionate spotlight in this country to put a bad image on us. But if you want to say that that's negative, you're saying that because you have a bias against foundational Black Americans. Because even when even if you say the spotlight is warranted, you have to also factor in all of the positives that we do, all of the doctors that we have, all of the lawyers that we have, all of the judges that we have,
Mhm.
the fact that we've been able to make so many strides politically. All
Yeah.
right. The fact all of our inventions, all of our innovation, the fact that pretty much everything in America that has changed and improved has a bit of foundational Black American in it, whether that's technology, the cell phone, the TV, sports, even just entertainment in general. The fact that we even have a Super Bowl, that really started with foundational Black Americans, and we know the history of that. So you
Mhm.
have to look at the positives. And when people say that, I say, clearly you're overlooking the positives because you want to focus on the negatives because you want to have you have a bias against us. But yet when it comes to your group of people, you're not going to be so critical of your group of people. You want to spotlight and put a highlight on all of the positives from wherever you're from. They always want to put a highlight on the positives of their group, and they want to downplay the negatives, which is much more severe than our negatives. But then when it comes to us, they want to only and hyper focus on our negative aspects and then ignore all of the positive aspects. So it's because of a bias. So I say, if we're going to compare apples to apples, okay, then our culture is laps ahead, years ahead, light years ahead of your culture. Y'all need to be catching up, okay? Because we got points on the board, y'all don't.
Sheesh. Hey, that's a bar right there, bro. In Chicago, how has immigration affected the foundational Black American community throughout the city?
Well, recently,
Yeah.
with the mass immigration that started under the Biden Harris administration, what's
Mhm.
been going on is that they've been placing them in certain community shelters. They've been putting them all in the shelters, but it hasn't been enough. So they've been opening up hotels and they've been opening up community shelters and stuff. And because of the fact that Brandon Johnson has signed executive orders as he come in, essentially allowing them not to be touched by law enforcement. What that's done is that's given them a green light to do anything and everything they want to do. So there's been rampant crime that's been going on. They've been breaking into department stores, Macy's, and things like that. They've been breaking into people's cars. I know people who've had their cars broken into and first stolen, and then they've been stripped apart, all of the things, all of the items taken out of the cars. They've been able to do that. They've been able to increase the sale of fentanyl in the city. There's been rampant prostitution going on. There's been burglary going on. So there's a lot of crime. So it first off allows, especially the elders, and
Mhm.
they have women who might live by themselves, even if they have children. It allows them to not be able to sleep as easily as they used to be able to because of all of the crime that's going on. They don't even want their kids to wait outside for the school bus to come. They take their kids to the school, or they watch the kids get on the bus, or they, what I'm saying. It
Mhm.
becomes a very dangerous situation for a lot of the elders, and then a lot of the women and children you know so that's the danger aspect. That's first and foremost, just off the fact that it's dangerous. And then plus they have a lot of different diseases that are coming from foreign lands that our immune system is not used to. So they're bringing in a lot of foreign diseases and things like that, um that we're just not used to. You have sex offenders and stuff like that. And I don't even want to get into that. And then, as far as the resources are concerned, the city has disproportionately went broke above and beyond. Okay, going so much so into debt to $1 billion, really over $1 billion, and that's only what they'll admit to, into
Right.
debt, trying to care for them, trying to make sure that they have housing, trying to make sure that
Mhm.
they have food, trying to make sure that they have clothes, all of these things. So the city has been paying for them. They've been paying for their hotel, which is not cheap. They've been paying for their food, which has not been cheap, and these people are not giving anything back to the economy because they really don't have work visas, because they're not here for work visas. They're here for asylum, let them tell
Mhm.
it. So they can't really expedite the work visas thing, which wouldn't have been fair regardless, because you have a lot of unemployment when it comes to young Black Americans. So if
Yep.
you have work that need people for, they should be the priority. So
Mhm.
even if they was to have work visas, why were there so many unemployed Black Americans in this city
Wow.
beforehand? But since they're not contributing whatsoever to the economy, the city is just really spending money. It's like um, putting water into a bucket with holes in it. Okay, you're not getting anything, but you're losing the water. Okay, nothing's coming back up out of it. So that's been happening over the course of years, so much so. And then you have other incidents like Brandon Johnson wanted to put military tents there over the winter, and then spent millions of dollars setting that up, wound up couldn't do that. So that's just millions of dollars in the drain. So when you have situations like that, the money starts to build up. And all of that starts to build up to the point where you're in debt of $1 billion. So what Brandon Johnson and the city had to do is they got to make up for that money.
Yeah.
So who has to pay for that? They make the citizens pay for that. So what they'll say is, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll increase the taxes, and Chicago's already very overtaxed. We'll increase the taxes on pretty much everything. What they tried to do, then they were unsuccessful, thankfully. But what they tried to do was they tried to increase the taxes on property. They tried to
Right.
increase the property taxes, but that didn't get enough votes to pass. But Brandon Johnson, tried to increase it several times before he completely threw that out. But they increased the taxes on bags, like the grocery bags that you get from the grocery store, increased the taxes on certain parking. They increased the taxes on streams. They increased, I believe they increased some type of water tax. I believe they increased different taxes on multiple different aspects of the city, and the cities already overtaxed. So even though they didn't necessarily increase the property taxes, they made up for it by increasing
Mhm.
the taxes on everything else. So now Chicago, which is already not an easy city to live in, has become a more difficult and expensive city based off of the residents. Now we have to pay and make up for the decisions of the government by allowing them to come over. They allowed them to come over. We were trying to tell them, hey, they need to go. Brandon Johnson and the government said no, they can stay. and now we're in debt, and now they're raising the property tax or the taxes on the citizens to make up for all of the damage that they've caused.
Goodness, man. Brother, I get so frustrated when I see clips from Chicago. I have family out in
Mhm,
Chicago, been there for family reunions, all that good stuff. But, seeing all the work that you've been doing, so many other great brothers, right? When I would see certain clips of other people talking about Black Americans, I saw one of an immigrant who pulled up to the town hall, called us lazy, all of those things.
mhm.
And then I didn't realize how much money was being funded towards this. But then in that same breath, I hear that Chicago, what about Chicago? All the violence. But then clearly the government and the city office has that money. How did you feel from just seeing all the funds being thrown towards that? But then when it comes to things like reparations, community activism, and things being funded towards us, we don't see those funds. But when it comes towards immigration or any other group, they got millions and millions and millions.
For it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting. It's something that I've been learning about for many years now. Growing up and you're seeing a lot of businesses, black businesses that used to be thriving. Chicago had thriving black businesses all
Hmm.
throughout the neighborhoods, the south side and the west side.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing abandoned buildings, abandoned
Mhm.
restaurants, abandoned housing and stuff.
Yeah.
And you think like, what happened? That's essentially because of gentrification. That's because a lot of black businesses they would be targeted, they would be overfined. You would have the health inspector come in and they would cherry pick everything. They wouldn't do that to the Asians in
Mm.
their businesses or the other ethnicities in their businesses, but they would do that to black people. And we would see the targeting of black people. And what a politician would come in and say, well, clearly there's been disproportionate resources sent to the north side of Chicago, downtown Chicago, and then on the south sides and west sides, they've been neglected. You can look at the public schools, for instance. You can see the quality of just the buildings in the public schools, and I'm talking about private or charter. I'm talking about the public schools in the black community versus in the white community. And this is what the government is supposed to be making sure that all of the public schools are up to date and up to code
Right.
and stuff like that. The apartments are up to date and up to code and all of that stuff. And they don't do that. It's just complete neglect, and you will have a politician come in and say, well, we're putting forth this initiative, we're putting forth this legislation or this program, and nothing ever comes about that. They do that on the campaign, and nothing ever comes about that. There's a couple of trinkets that get thrown, another maybe Dr. King Street or something
Mm.
like that that gets thrown. And what they'll do is they'll tell us, like, hey, our hands are tied, we're
Yeah.
trying so hard, we just really don't have the funding, something's come up, and they tell us that their hands are tied, and they've been doing that for years. And what a lot of people are realizing is that when these other groups of people just essentially come up out of nowhere, all right, they didn't have a plan for them to come up. Clearly they didn't have a plan, but they just came up out of nowhere and they became the top of everybody's priority. Not only did they become the top of everybody's priority, there was a whole bunch of money that the Chicago government was claiming that they didn't have. They were claiming that they didn't have money to help the schools. They didn't have money to help the communities, to fix the streets. There's potholes like you driving on the moon in Chicago. Certain times, restaurants been abandoned because black people can't get loans from the banks. Black people can't get grants. What we've been finding out is that these other people have not been pulling themselves up by their bootstraps like that one guy was trying to claim. A lot of these people don't just get loans, low interest loans, they get grants that they just get handed grants.
You
We
don't even have to
we
pay
are
that money back.
unaware of that. You say
Yeah.
what?
I was saying, man, with a grant, you don't have to pay that money back. It's all yours.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we've been told that these are the model minorities and that we need to work like them, and our culture is messed up. That's why we're unsuccessful and they're successful, and they get subsidized. Even Dr. King was talking about that. They get grants and they get special programs and training programs, and they get preferential treatment as far as jobs are concerned. And then next thing you know, the dominant society waves their finger at us like, hey, if they can do it, why can't y'all do it? Y'all must be lazy. So with the recent surge in the mass immigration that's come over, and we've seen all of the real money that the government actually has, and how the government can put their heads together to figure things out when it comes to other groups of people, that only highlights the fact that we've been ignored. It's like somebody who owes you money, and every time you see them, they say, "Hey, I'm sorry. Times is tough. I ain't got it like that. And my bad, my bad." And then you finding out that they've been at a party and they've been living it up and they've been buying stuff and they got new shoes and new clothes and a new car. And when they come to you, they say they don't got that money. But you see them spending the money that they claim that they don't got you. So it just highlights the fact that they're not trying to pay you back.
Man, brother, you have been phenomenal. I probably just got like a few more questions for you, but man, I'm
Oh,
thoroughly
yeah.
enjoying this conversation. Seeing everything again that's just transpiring is crazy times. What words of advice would you have for certain Black people out there who are afraid of this current Trump administration? What words of encouragement, of advice would you have for them?
Well, the very first thing I would say is that we've survived hell and back. Okay. We've literally survived being considered in this very country, under the same government, being considered less than human beings.
Mm,
Okay. We were not considered human beings. And to a degree, still under the system of white supremacy, we're still not treated as human beings. Okay.
wow.
We still don't have the full rights of that a human being should have. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a Trayvon Martin. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a Emmett Till. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a Tamir Rice. You wouldn't have a Breonna Taylor, and so on and so forth. You wouldn't have these situations, George Floyd. You wouldn't have these situations. Um, so we've overcome that. Okay. So we've already been at the bottom. You can't get more bottom than rock bottom. And we've just been making progress ever since then. So for people who are like, oh, we're going to have it worse than we've ever had, we're survivors. And I want you to think that about yourself, first and foremost. We are survivors. So if he came in with an agenda to attack the community, we will survive like we always have. That's number one. All right. Think that about yourself always, whether that's Trump, Biden, Harris, JD Vance, no matter what. Just view yourself and your ancestry and your lineage that way. Number two, learn not just based off of what a certain political party is saying about somebody else, learn independently. Okay. Is Trump doing is he doing things that I disagree with? Yes, there's things that he's done, what I'm saying, I disagree with. There's things every politician has done that I disagree with. Do I think that he got it out for Black America based off of his legislation recently? No. And I'm not going to allow the Democratic Party or Democratic shields to manipulate us into believing that he has it out for us and that they're the safe option, because that's what they're trying to do. Is they're trying to manipulate every single thing he does, whether that's the birthright citizenship thing,
Yeah.
whether that's DEI, regardless of what he does, they're going to make it seem like that's an attack on Black America. And
Mm,
you need to look independently. You can look literally at the executive orders. You can look literally at the legislation. When you look at DEI, you can look at the numbers and the statistics of who that benefits.
yeah.
And then you can make the determination yourself of whether we need this or whether we don't need this. Because
Mm,
they're going to tell you that things that really benefit everybody else, it benefits you, and they want you to believe that it benefits you because you got to be the force behind it. Like, for instance, when they were talking about voting rights, and they keep trying to make this thing about voting rights, but that's really a thing for illegal immigrants, undocumented people who are not supposed to be able to vote, but they make it seem like that's for Black people. So don't fall for the manipulation. Okay. Look independently. All right. And you can't fall for the manipulation. All right. And you can make the best situation. You can make the best situation. So don't be afraid. There will be hard times coming up, but there was always going to be hard times coming up, regardless
yeah.
of who is the president. But don't
Mhm.
don't fear Armageddon because a political party wants you to be afraid. Don't do that.
Good talk, man. Seeing that as well, we also have critical race theory where people are talking about those things, but
Mhm.
we've always had white teachers who weren't trying to give Black history. We've even had Black institutions that weren't even trying to teach Black history. For our own children's sake, those young babies, how should we teach them Black history?
Um, well, what we need to do is as we need to take the initiative, especially black men. We definitely need to take the initiative to first off learn it, and we have to be fluent in it. Okay, we can't just be fluent in some facts about Jackie Robinson and some of the and not no disrespect, but some of the basic things that are taught because they'll say, oh well, you had Jackie Robinson, then you had Rosa Parks and Dr. King, and then Montgomery bus boycott, and that's kind of pretty much it. So there's not that it's not important, but there's the general knowledge of black history, but we need to know deeper than that. Not only do we need to know the general knowledge, we need to know the details of the general knowledge. If we want to know about the bus boycott, we need to know the details of the bus boycott. We need to know the details of Rosa Parks's life, of Dr. King's life, of Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroads. Not just it happened, we need to know the details of where they went, of who assisted, of what Harriet Tubman had to do, when it started, and all. We need to know the details of that, you know, and then we need to know more than what they're teaching as far as the surface level, as far as our inventors, as far as other activists and strides that we've made, movements that we've made, so and we need to have that culturally talked about, especially to the children, and taught to the children on a regular basis. We can't have it to be where the teacher says something and then the kid asks the parent a question. The parent needs to be sitting down and letting these kids know this, know just every Sunday or something like that. Just give them a book or read a book to them, you know, have this stuff be implemented in the household, that in that develops a taste for more black knowledge in the children, so we won't even have to rely, which we shouldn't be anyway, but we wouldn't have to rely on the school system. So if the school said we're not teaching nothing to do with black history, our children are still going to learn black history regardless of what the school says.
That's excellent. Why do you think foundational Black Americans, this movement is making Pan-Africanists kind of nervous? We see the Democratic Party kind of nervous. I could be honest too, bro. Republicans as well, because Black people ain't falling for that same okey doke of, oh, so since I left over there, I'm gonna sign up with y'all. Black people, for once, I see you're down right there in the middle. Why do you think foundational Black Americans make everybody else so uncomfortable right now?
Well, to answer the question about pan-africanism,
Yeah.
is because a lot of the people who want and push pan-africanism, there's two types of people. I don't call them all tethers, but a lot of them are tethers, and a lot of them use the plight of black America, like everybody else, as a ramp so they can get a boost, so they can get a heads up. So because they are black, but they're not foundational black American, they'll say, okay, well, I'm black, so I'm a part of the black struggle. So let me get this scholarship. Let me get this Dr. King scholarship, or let me get this Juneteenth scholarship and stuff like that. So you'll have them using our plight as ramps, so they can get ahead. And then when they get ahead, they'll say, well, we have so many Nigerian doctors, or we have so many Nigerian people in medical school, and Caribbean people in medical school. What are y'all doing? We just coming over here and working hard. So but they know for a fact that you got into medical school based off of a Dr. King scholarship, that y'all were able to be, or y'all had preferential treatment in receiving. So they need us to have this Pan-African mindset because they've been using that, okay, to boost them. And if we say, okay, no, we need to delineate, because this stuff needs to go to foundational black Americans. We need to be the priority when it comes to these things. They are looking like, okay, that ramp is about to leave. So we need them to be on that page. Okay, we need them to be on that page. We can't allow them to put their lineage first when it comes to that. That's one, okay, opportunist who use Pan-Africanism. And then you have some people who I feel like genuinely believe in the concept of it. They genuinely believe that this is where we need to be going, and they just don't understand. They're too stuck in their ways, and they don't understand that this is where, the movement is. Okay, they view it as some type of thing of hating Africa, and it's not anything to do with hating Africa. I don't hate Africa. I don't hate African people. I don't hate the Caribbean. I don't hate Caribbean people, and I'm not prejudiced against them, but I do understand that there is a priority that I have to have as far as my lineage, and a lot of foundational Black Americans are just prioritizing our lineage really for the first time, because we've always prioritized any Black person and every Black person. So now we're prioritizing our lineage, and they're interpreting us prioritizing our lineage as having some type of hatred or disdain for the diaspora, which is incorrect. As far as the Republicans and everything, they're nervous because the political parties both are nervous because we've always looked at one political party as, well, Democrats good guy, Republicans bad guy. And then some people look as, okay, Republicans good guy, Democrats bad guy. And we are not seeing the fact that both of them are bad guys. We're not, both of them, there's not necessarily, or there doesn't have to be a good guy in the situation. So if there's no good guys in the situation, we can look at things from a very impartial point of view, which is
Yeah.
what they don't want us to see. Neither party wants us to be impartial to the political system. Because when we say it over here, we all like, hey, I'm not blind to the nonsense that you guys are doing, but I'm not blind to the nonsense that they're doing over here. I'm here to have a completely business transaction. What you got to offer, what do you have to offer? And neither party wants that. They want blind loyalty. And they're seeing that a growing number of foundational Black Americans are not having any blind loyalty to any political party, which is good.
Indeed. Yes, indeed, bro. What do you think the future for foundational Black Americans looks like within the next few years, Afro Elite?
Oh man, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Um, I think that we're definitely going to make some strides as far as tangibles are concerned, just because of the fact that it's such a hot button issue, and it's such a important issue that we're not allowing to die. We're not allowing anything else to take front page. You know, tangibles, reparations. We got a reparations commission kind of going on in New York right now. You still got that
Yep.
going on in California. You got that going on in Illinois, and then you have other smaller things going on in different places across the nation. So the fact that we as foundational Black Americans keep putting that on the front news, I'm not saying reparations are going to come in the next couple of years, but
Right.
something substantive and tangible is definitely going to be coming, where our lineage is prioritized and we can start getting out of this hole in the next couple of years, just because we're keeping the issues on the front page news, and especially with social media, which is why what you're doing, brother, is such a good thing. Keeping our issues on the front page. I definitely also think that you're going to, because of just us talking about how rich our culture is, our history is, and our lineage is, it's going to really boost the esteem of a lot of young foundational Black American brothers and sisters, understanding that we're not lost people who've been kidnapped and all we've been is slaves, which is what we've been taught. That, we were slaves, and then they skip over all the way to the civil rights movement, and then we're still kind of like lost people when you don't really know your history, know where you're from, know your greatness, know the greatness of your own lineage and your ancestry. you know you feel lost, you feel like purposeless, you're living kind of without a purpose. Now that we're understanding and learning our rich culture, it starts to develop a sense of drive in a lot of young foundational Black Americans, a sense of purpose in a lot of young foundational Black Americans. So what I predict is that you're going to see a lot of us going into medical school soon. You're going to see a lot of us kind of abandoning the boule academics and going more into a trade and entrepreneurship type of thing. You're going to see a lot of us wanting to own certain things. Ownership instead of degrees is where I'm seeing a lot of the youth going to. I'm seeing a lot of the youth being all like, "Well, a degree is cool, but I want ownership of something. So I want to own a radio station, or I want to own this type of rest. I want to." So ownership and entrepreneurship is definitely where I'm seeing the youth develop interest in. Not to say a degree is bad if it's something pretty good, like a medical degree, in the medical field, or engineering degree or law degree. because those things are also necessary, you know. But I definitely see entrepreneurship and ownership and that motivation, community building. I definitely see that in the next few years as far as foundational Black Americans are concerned.
Yes, sir. Very last question, bro. You've been great for 60 minutes plus at this point.
Mhm.
Man, from everything that we've covered about voting, all of that stuff to now, our history, what makes foundational Black Americans such a special people in your own opinion?
Wow, that's a great question. Um, really, when you put somebody's back against the wall and you give them no other option, and I feel like with our history dealing with the system of white supremacy in such a raw form that other groups of people didn't really receive, you know, because we were not confused by who the slave master was and who the overseer was. Other groups of people, they didn't get the direct white supremacy. So their overseer looked like them. Our overseers didn't look like us. So it allowed us to have this raw version of it, and we were not confused by it. So we developed a sense of justice against oppression that was not confused, that wasn't clouded in confusion. So it allowed us to develop a sense of righteousness or a spirit. A lot of people are saying the Mujara spirit. It allowed us to develop that from early on and embed that in our culture, in our teachings, and how we would go about interacting with each other as far as the community is concerned. Okay, because we've had such a raw version of it. We see the potential of what the world can be. It allowed us to, in the very beginning of our ethnogenesis, develop this righteous and rebellious spirit against oppression and subjugation that other groups of people have not um developed, because of, I would say, they sometimes acquiesce, sometimes they feel like, hey, I'm eh, if I'm number two being oppressed, I'm glad I'm not number one. So they would acquiesce to that, and they would develop their own system of oppression just so they wouldn't be at the bottom. You know, we've always been at the bottom, and then there's other people who get confused because they didn't have that raw version of it, you know. So I feel like this stuff makes us special. When our backs are put up against the wall, you will develop a Madam CJ Walker, you will develop a Harriet Tubman, you will develop a Nat Turner. These things are essentially forced. You know, pressure makes diamonds. So the fact that we've had pressure unique to us created so many diamonds. That's what I would say.
H man, Afro Elite, brother. I was already a fan of your work. After this, even bigger, man. So you are
Thank
always welcome back on the platform. I enjoyed this. On the way out, bro, where can everybody follow you, donate, subscribe to the channel, keep in touch with you, all that good stuff?
you. Afro Elite on YouTube. This number
Mhm.
just Afro Elite on YouTube, pretty much Afro Elite everywhere. Afro Elite on Instagram, the Afro Elite on X, or formerly Twitter. Um, I go live on TikTok sometimes. That's Afro Elite on TikTok. Let me see. As far as the Cash App is $ Afro Elite. Since you said donate, $Afro Elite 1010. Also emails, as far as for people who might want to email me, is Afro Elite and then 1010 at gmail.com.
Got it, man. Thank you so much again, brother, for your time. Keep up all the great work. I salute you, man. And I most definitely have to have you back on soon. So, brother, I appreciate you again, man. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you so much for inviting me. I've been watching your work. You do great work. You do great interviews. I love the questions. They're so thought out. They're not basic questions that are asked all the time, you know. And you also give good feedback as well too. You let the person, you know, get their point across, but you also give good feedback. So it's not like I'm just talking to myself. So I think you have a talent with it, you know, and I love to see, and I would like to help your platform grow. And I'm glad to be a part of this. So thank you.
My God, man. Thank you, brother. You be safe out there and keep up all the great work, man. I will most definitely stay in touch. Much love, brother.
Thank you.
All right. Peace.